While I was watching TV, my husband burst into the room, his face contorted with anger. After a quick exchange of words with his mother, he snapped, "Why are you wasting time?" Before I could react, he hurled my father's cherished TV at me, the corner striking my head. Blood began to pour as I begged for help, but he remained unyielding. Grabbing me by the hair, he dragged me outside, leaving me shivering in the cold. In desperation, I called my brother, Daniel, but what came next was even more horrifying than I could have ever anticipated. I'm Harper Collins, and this is the story of my painful journey, a tale of betrayal, resilience, and self-discovery. 3 years ago, if anyone had told me I'd be telling this story, I would have laughed in disbelief. Life has a way of twisting things, doesn't it? It all started when I crossed paths with Jonathan Carter. At 26, I was living a quiet life in Seattle, working as a graphic designer. My existence was simple, until Jonathan entered the picture, a 30-year-old banker. He was effortlessly charming, attentive, and made me feel special in ways I hadn't felt before. Our romance was swift, filled with candlelit dinners, romantic walks, and late-night talks about our dreams. 6 months later, when he proposed, I accepted without a second thought. Our friends dubbed us the perfect couple, and I believed them, but as I would soon learn, perfection is often nothing more than an illusion. After our wedding, we moved into a lovely house in a peaceful neighborhood, and for a while, everything felt perfect. I devoted myself to building our life together, cooking his favorite dishes, and making our house feel like home. Jonathan worked long hours, and though I missed him, I told myself it was all for our future. But the tension began to mount when his mother, Patricia, moved in shortly after our wedding. Officially, she was just helping out, but it didn't take long to realize her presence was far more controlling than she let on. A retired teacher in her late 50s, Patricia carried an air of authority and was quick to criticize everything, from the way I managed the household to how I dressed and cooked. No matter how hard I tried, I could never seem to meet her expectations. And Jonathan, instead of defending me, always sided with her. "Mom's just trying to help," he'd say dismissively. One evening, after a long day of cleaning, I settled down on the couch to watch TV. It was a small comfort, as the TV was a gift from my late father. I found solace in it, but that night, my peace was shattered. Jonathan came home late, tired but offering a brief smile. For a moment, I hoped for a quiet evening, but then, Patricia appeared, whispering something in his ear. His demeanor shifted instantly, his expression darkened. "Get up," he shouted, "go to the kitchen and make me a fresh meal." Confused, I replied, "Dinner's already ready. I kept it warm for you." "I don't want that," he snapped. "I want something fresh, now." Exhausted, I hesitated. "Jonathan, I've been on my feet all day. Can't you just..." Before I could finish, his fury erupted. "How dare you talk back to me?" He crossed the room in an instant, grabbed my father's TV, lifted it above his head, and smashed it down. The corner hit my head, sending a sharp pain coursing through me. I collapsed to the floor, blood dripping down my face. "Maybe this will teach you to listen," he growled, as Patricia stood by with her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. "You don't deserve to live here if you can't show us respect." Bleeding and shaking, I begged for help, but there was none to be found. Jonathan dragged me to the door and shoved me outside into the cold night. With nowhere else to turn, I called Daniel. When he answered, I broke down. "Daniel, please, I need help." "I'm on my way," he said firmly. "Where are you?" When he arrived, his face was a mixture of worry and anger. He helped me into his car and drove me to the hospital. "We're going to make sure this doesn't go unpunished," he said, his grip tight on the steering wheel. As the doctor treated my wounds, a small glimmer of hope flickered within me. I didn't have to endure this any longer. This was the beginning of something new, where I would fight for my dignity, no matter what. I didn't know where to begin, but I knew I had to tell Daniel everything. Taking a deep breath, I began to recount everything: Patricia's interference, Jonathan's coldness, and my futile attempts to win their approval. Finally, I told him about the night Jonathan had smashed the TV on my head. Daniel listened intently, his fists clenched, his jaw tight with anger. When I finished, he was seething. "He's a monster," Daniel growled, his voice low, "and his mother is no better. Harper, you can never go back there, ever." "I know," I whispered through my tears, "but what can I do? They've made it clear I don't belong. I don't even have my stuff anymore." "Forget your things," Daniel said firmly. "What matters now is your safety. We'll handle everything else. But first, they're going to pay for what they did to you." I nodded, a mixture of fear and relief flooding through me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. Daniel was my pillar, and I knew he wouldn't let me face this on my own. In the days that followed, I stayed with Daniel, recovering both physically and emotionally. He helped me file for divorce, an overwhelming but liberating step. Letting go of Jonathan felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had lost, but even as freeing as it wasn't enough. Anger still burned within me. I needed justice. One evening, as we sat together in Daniel's living room, I said, I want to do more than leave him. I want to expose him for the fraud he is. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, he's hiding something, I said, my voice shaky but determined. The late hours, the secret phone calls, it doesn't add up. Daniel nodded slowly. You could be right. If he's hiding something, we'll find out. Let's dig deeper. And so, we decided to hire a private investigator. Daniel found Jack Lewis, a seasoned pro known for uncovering hidden truths. When we met Jack, I explained my suspicions about Jonathan's behavior at the bank. Jack took detailed notes and assured us he'd start the investigation immediately. The waiting was excruciating. Every day, I wondered what Jack would uncover. Part of me worried I was being paranoid, but a deeper part of me, the part that had endured Jonathan's lies, knew there was something dark lurking beneath the surface. 2 weeks later, Jack called. I found something, he said. Can we meet in person? My heart raced as Daniel and I drove to Jack's office. When we arrived, Jack laid out the evidence he had uncovered. The truth was even worse than I had feared. Jonathan wasn't just controlling, he was a criminal. He had been embezzling money from the bank, laundering it through fake accounts, and funneling it into offshore holdings. Jack showed us the documents, bank statements, and surveillance photos. It was all irrefutable. I stared at the evidence, my mind spinning. I knew there was something he was hiding. I whispered, this is massive. Daniel, his voice resolute, declared, we're going to the authorities. Jack gave a firm nod. You should, but stay vigilant. People like Jonathan don't take kindly to being trapped. A shiver ran down my spine, but Jack's words rang true. Jonathan was a threat, and this had evolved into something far beyond me. His actions had harmed others, and I couldn't stand by any longer. The following day, Daniel and I went to the police with Jack's findings. Detective Rebecca Hayes, the officer in charge, listened closely as we presented the evidence. This is solid, she remarked, flipping through the documents. We can launch an investigation right away. As we left the station, a mix of fear, relief, and empowerment washed over me. I had been cornered for so long, feeling helpless, but now, I was fighting back, and for the first time in ages, I felt like victory might be within reach. The days following our meeting with Detective Hayes were filled with nervous anticipation. The investigation was now in the hands of the police, and I waited anxiously for updates. Jack's warning echoed in my mind, Jonathan is dangerous. I stayed busy, trying to focus on anything to keep my mind off the inevitable confrontation. Daniel was my constant support, offering comfort when my fears became overwhelming, but even his reassurances couldn't entirely ease the anxiety. I knew Jonathan would make his move once he found out the investigation was underway. A week later, Detective Hayes called us in. We arrived, and she motioned for us to sit. We've made significant progress, she said, opening a folder on her desk. Thanks to the evidence your investigator provided, we've uncovered Jonathan's involvement in a large-scale money laundering scheme. He's been embezzling funds for over 2 years, covering his tracks with shell companies. His crimes are vast. The revelation left me breathless. What happens now? I asked, my voice trembling. We have a solid case against him, Detective Hayes replied. We're monitoring him closely and preparing to arrest him. But you need to stay alert. Once he realizes we're closing in, he may try to reach out to you, or worse. I gripped the armrest of my chair, determined not to show fear. I won't let him intimidate me, I said, though deep inside, terror gripped my heart. As we left the station, Daniel turned to me. You're handling this so well, Harper. For the first time in a long while, a flicker of pride sparked inside me. I was standing my ground, and I wasn't going to stop until justice prevailed. The days leading up to Jonathan's arrest were filled with unease. I couldn't stop wondering how he would react. Would he become violent or play the victim? Part of me dreaded the confrontation, but a stronger part, one I barely recognized, was eager to see him face the consequences of his actions. When Detective Hayes called to tell me Jonathan had been apprehended, a wave of emotions hit me. He didn't resist, she said, but he's claiming it's all a misunderstanding. Of course he is, I muttered bitterly. It was just like Jonathan to try to manipulate the situation. Still, knowing he was behind bars, even for a short time, offered a sense of safety I hadn't felt in months. The trial preparations were grueling. Memories of Jonathan, his cold glares, the nights spent crying, and the brutal moment he threw me out, haunted me. But those memories, as painful as they were, only fueled my determination. I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore. I was standing up for anyone who had ever felt powerless. The day of the trial arrived quickly. The courtroom was imposing, with its high ceilings and serious atmosphere. I sat beside Daniel, clutching his hand as Jonathan was brought in. He appeared calm, even arrogant, as if he still thought he could talk his way out of this. But as the prosecution presented the evidence, documents, surveillance footage, and Jack's testimony, his confidence began to crack. When it was my turn to testify, I made my way to the stand, my legs shaking, but my resolve unwavering. I recounted everything, the abuse, the deceit, and the night he smashed the TV over my head. My voice wavered at times, but I refused to stop. I wouldn't let him silence me again. Jonathan's defense tried to discredit me, labeling me a spiteful ex-wife, but the evidence was irrefutable. By the trial's end, it was clear to everyone present, he was guilty. The judge's ruling came swiftly. Jonathan was convicted on multiple charges of embezzlement, money laundering, and fraud. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. When the gavel fell, relief surged through me. Jonathan could no longer hurt me. As Daniel and I walked out of the courthouse, the sun shone brightly, but I still felt the weight of it all. "You did it, Harper," Daniel said, pride in his voice. "You faced him." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Moving on wasn't easy. The scars, both physical and emotional, remained, and there were nights when I woke, haunted by the memories of his violence. But each day, I reminded myself of my resilience. I had survived. Reclaiming my independence became a vital part of my healing. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in downtown Seattle. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a space where Jonathan's shadow could no longer reach. Work became my refuge. Pouring myself into design projects helped rebuild my confidence. My supportive boss gave me the chance to prove myself, and with each success, I proved to myself that I was capable. Throughout it all, Daniel stood by me, a constant source of strength. Whether it was bringing groceries or just sitting with me, his presence reminded me that I wasn't alone. One day, I found an old wedding photo. In it, Jonathan was smiling at me, his arm around my waist. I stared at the image, trying to reconcile the man I once loved with the monster he had become. Finally, I tore the photo in half and threw it away. It felt symbolic, a final release of the person I had once known. Jonathan's sentencing shook the community. His crimes were all over the news, and the bank issued a public apology for its failure. Patricia, his mother, moved away, no doubt out of embarrassment. Part of me wanted to confront her, but I realized it wasn't worth my time. My energy was better spent focusing on myself and my future. One evening, Daniel and I celebrated at a small Italian restaurant. As we raised our glasses, he made a toast. "To your freedom." "To my freedom," I echoed, a true smile lighting up my face, born from a place of peace. Looking back now, I see how far I've come. What happened to me was horrifying, but it didn't break me. It taught me that I deserve better, that I have a voice, and that no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way out. Jonathan underestimated me. He underestimated my strength. Now, as I look ahead, I know one thing for sure: I'm free to live, to dream, and to build a life on my own terms. And that is the greatest victory of all. Thank you for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay amazed.